Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this joint event between Investors and People and the 5% Club around about apprenticeships. And our theme today is how do we break down internal stereotypes around about apprenticeships. I'd like to welcome my colleague from the 5% Club, Jill Cronin. Want to wave and say hello, Jill?
Hi, Paul. Thank you very much. And I don't know, do you want me to say a bit about the club now? Shall I introduce the club? Yeah, well, I know we've got quite a few of our members on today because obviously, as Paul said, we're doing this as jointly with Investors in People. But for those of you who don't know us, we're a dynamic movement of employer members all working together to sort of increase prosperity across the UK by developing earn and learn skills and training opportunities. I've got nearly 600 members representing more than 1.2 million employees. The average across our membership is probably about 5.6 to 6% of their employees in earn and learn. So it's great to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me, Investors in People. I know as well, Investors in People wanted me to cover the housekeeping for our event today. Everyone who's joining us, your mics and your cameras are off, but we definitely want to hear from you. The structure of today's event is going to be, we're going to hear from Lisa from Capita first, then Katherine from the Sutton Trust, then we're going to take questions. So during the event, please post your questions into Q&A, and then Paul and I, once Lisa and Katherine have finished their presentations, we'll cover off the questions, and and it would be really good if you could say the company you're from, because sometimes names appear and you don't know who people are. So without much further ado, I think we should get on with things. Everyone's busy. So I'm delighted to introduce Lisa Pinfield, who is Group Head of Talent and Succession at Capita, for her presentation.
Many thanks, Jill. And hopefully those slides are just loading now. To the start. So good morning, everybody, and delighted to be with you all this morning, and to have been invited by both Investors in People and the 5% Club. So my role here at Capita, I am the Group Head of Talent and Succession, and really my role spans a variety of different areas in that, typically focusing on kind of the annual performance cycle at Capita, our succession of our high potential staff, but also the area I'm hugely passionate around, and that's our apprenticeships, our early careers offering, and our professional development and our levy funded learning as well. So just wanted to take you through today a few slides just around Capita's approach to early careers and professional development, and how we've really changed some of the hearts and minds internally, and a significant amount of mindset around the benefits of apprenticeships, and also particularly drawing out some of the key themes that we've had around moving away from graduate programs and more into the apprenticeship market. So for us, from a kind of socially responsible resource and development perspective, our objectives there are just listed down the right-hand side. So we're really focusing on targeting support for young people through our strategic programs and partnerships. We've got some amazing providers that we work with that really help us to bring that objective to life. We have a huge focus around how we remove barriers and make the workplace experience more accessible to disadvantaged groups. And also recognising that apprenticeships aren't just for individuals that are 16 to 24, but that those core skills can be developed at any of life stages through education, employability, recruitment and employee development as well. So from our experience, some of the benefits that we're seeing from employing apprentices into our organisation, it's really supporting the needs of a competitive and successful UK economy and contributing to that. It's really supporting Capita in terms of our social value proposition and supporting us, particularly working with a lot of our government clients that have a high weighting for investment in social value as part of our bid process as well. It's one of the biggest benefits, I think, and my team talk about all this at the time, but that increased level of creativity and innovation that we're seeing from apprentices, that energy and the understanding of emerging technologies as well, and apprentices bringing that insight. Increased employee engagement, we are seeing a reduced level of attrition through the loyalty that apprenticeships brings, and also just that longer term talent pipeline, helping us to kind of reduce that churn really that we see in certain areas of our business, and obviously that impacting on reduced kind of recruitment, training and salary costs as well. So how we approach this, when the levy was brought in, we didn't really have a strategic approach to apprenticeships across the organisation. Capita is made up now of 3 core divisions, and across those divisions, of which there were 7 at the time, there was a real varied approach to apprenticeships. We had very small pockets, and where we were bringing in early careers talent, it was mainly focused on graduate development and graduate recruitment. And when the levy came in, we really used that as an opportunity to start changing that mindset and look at how we can develop apprentices right across our organisation. So what we've done is we've split that out into kind of 2 key areas really. So we've got our early careers portfolio, and then we've got our levy funded professional development. I'll talk a little bit more about the professional development in a second. But what we've tried to do is badge that area away from the term apprenticeships, just because of the stigma that comes with that within our organisation, and educate and change people's mindset around the opportunity of levy funded learning, and the opportunity to get an accredited qualification, and really that the apprenticeship element is a funding mechanism for us to be able to do that. We've got a dedicated team, so kind of pre-levy, again it was managed very much in pockets, but I've now got a dedicated team that focus on early careers and a dedicated team that focus on professional development, and sitting at the core of that is everything we do from a quality and governance perspective. So we're just in terms of how we manage our levy and gifting opportunities, how we're involved in trailblazers, how we report and show return on investment to the organisation, and how we really engage the organisation on that journey with us. And then from a early careers perspective, we're doing a significant amount at the moment in terms of kickstarts and apprenticeships. We have small pockets of activity in terms of kind of that more traditional work experience, traineeships and internships, but it's all in our strategy to grow for 2022, including the opportunity around T-levels as well, and expanding kind of our portfolio there. And then on our levy funded programmes, we've got over 1,000 learners that are doing a variety of different programmes, but particularly focused on leadership and management, programme management and digital and data skills, as those are kind of the areas that we've had real significant gaps previously in terms of how we've developed our staff in our colleagues through that way, and actually now having the opportunity to have really, really well thought out contextualized programs with that kind of apprenticeship wraparound has really started to see some really good return on investment for us there. So thinking about then our youth employability, so our youth employability covers all of the things you can see on screen there. You'll see that some are very much work in progress, some are live. We've had some huge success with our youth council and our partnerships, external partnerships with people like the youth group. But we're doing some great work in terms of schools engagement, kickstart and apprenticeships. And what you'll probably notice on there that really graduate programs aren't featuring. So for us, we have shifted away from taking on graduates as our primary youth employability strategy. And as I say, focus much more on those apprenticeships. And I've got a few reasons for that further on in this deck. Thinking about those apprenticeships, so as I said, we've got over 1,000 learners currently on programme. And for us, we are looking at growing that number to 2,000 in 2022. We've got quite an aggressive plan to get us there. which also includes us really ramping up our direct entry apprenticeship offering in some of our Capita experience areas, and creating 500 new opportunities there for next year. It's been really fascinating working with our group resourcing partners through this journey. We've completely ripped up the traditional recruitment rulebook to remove kind of barriers for young people, and really supporting young people to go through that process. It's much more focused on gamified resourcing, and we're really looking at behaviours, ability and motivation of an individual, rather than looking at kind of the typical sort of skills, knowledge and experience that you would expect to see on CVs. So CVs are completely out, and actually the response that we've had and the diversity of candidates that we've had through our programmes this year has been incredible. And not only does that, you know, bring a lot of diversity of thought, but we're seeing a huge amount of tangible benefits for taking that approach. Just very, you know, high level in terms of our principles. So for every programme that we bring into Capita, we are, you know, ensuring that it follows a core set of principles. So there is some correlation between all of our programmes. But so we've got kind of a standardised way that we assess, we bring in cohorts, we induct those individuals, apprentices into our business, really concentrating on that professional development wraparound. So outside of their apprenticeship, what other soft skills are we developing? How are we building that community so that those apprentices do get that uni experience as well whilst they're working with us, as we know some crave that. And the opportunity for them to collaborate and work on projects together. So regardless of what area of their business that they're placed into, they get that opportunity to come together as a community and work on different projects and collaborations. And obviously the government funding that we get supports us to be able to do that. So for Capita, we're focusing on kind of 5 key streams that you can see in the different colours there, all supported by a different apprenticeship standard. And then we're kind of, I guess, putting our arms around these individuals. And I've got a team of early careers leads that, you know, really focus on how they can support from a pastoral care perspective, but also give those kind of new to work key, you know, soft skills to develop. So things like self-awareness, presentation skills, interpersonal communication, all the standard things that I think we take for granted, but actually giving that as a really well thought out wraparound is working really nicely. And then obviously access to that real support and community, and you know, the nice to do collaboration and activities and events. We've got a number of other areas that we support kind of on smaller 1s and 2s basis in more of our technical areas, so that we can ensure that they still get the same experience, even if they're not part of a larger cohort that comes in. And typically they are more technical roles, things like user experience, software, etc. And then from that, what we're trying to be able to demonstrate is that actually you can have a career with Capita through coming in from an apprenticeship. So it might be that an individual starts on our Business Associate Level 3 programme, but actually what that can then lead to is multiple different pathways through our professional development. So they can go through onto more of a leadership role, or actually they could specialise into something you know, more like sales, data, project management, and then move through to the higher degree levels if they so wish to. But of course, we also have that direct entry into those more graduate apprenticeships as well for certain role areas. And this is working quite well, and we're kind of going through a discovery stage at the moment of how we can really make this work within our kind of contact centre environments as well, where traditionally we've struggled to get that kind of apprenticeship buy-in. And again, a lot of that's down to mindset. So why have we shifted? I think for the individual, you know, it gives them a practical approach to their learning. It encourages individuals to focus on a specific career and learn that occupation whilst doing the job. we've been able to give, you know, that real hands-on experience and that opportunity to apply that learning straight into their roles. So for our students that don't really enjoy that classroom environment, that's great. And obviously from a financial support, earn whilst you learn, avoid that debt, and supporting some of our more disadvantaged communities. You know, not everybody's afforded that opportunity of going to university, so it's really giving that a different lens. And for us in Capita, we're just seeing much more loyalty from our apprentices, that real positive impact on attrition, that real creativity and mindset, you know, and that diversity that brings into the organisation. We've also found that our apprentices are kind of less entitled. We've battled that around so much, but we were finding that with a lot of our our graduate programmes, we were almost creating really entitled individuals that then we weren't able to keep up with their expectations post-programme, and therefore we would see one of our competitors come along and take them because they could offer them a slightly better role post-programme. And actually that wasn't working for us. We were seeing, you know, that churn, whereas with our apprenticeships we are absolutely seeing that loyalty, and I guess that kind of less entitled feel, which I know can be a bit controversial, but it's certainly something that we've lived and experienced. So just conscious of time, but very quickly on our professional development portfolio, we support 68 different apprenticeship standards. And when I talk about professional development, that's anybody that's a Capita colleague that has access to go on to one of our professional levy funded apprenticeship programmes. Of course, that is for England only, really. So we do have a challenge with the devolved nations, and we're working with kind of providers in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales to look at what funding's available, and we've got small pockets of programmes going, but the high volume here is in England. We've had to do a really significant amount of work with internal engagement, and again changing that mindset. You know, we have a lot of people that come to us and say, well, I've got a master's degree, why do I want to do a level 3 data programme? And actually it's changing the mindset in terms of that technical skill development rather than the qualification level. And as I say, the majority of our programmes there, although we do support 68 different standards, are in the management, leadership, data and programme management space. And the graphs just give you a real kind of view in terms of, you know, that level 4 and 5 with kind of our kind of sweet spot, and in terms of our age profile as well, with kind of 31 to 40 being our kind of, you know, average age of doing our professional development programs rather than that entry early careers activity. So it definitely hasn't been plain sailing, and I think my team would be, you know, kicking me now if they were next to me to say it's not all been wonderful as the story may paint. But we have overcome a lot of hurdles in the last 18 months, particularly around kind of that education piece. So educating on the 20% off the job, making it really easy for our learners that are on programme to evidence their 20%, changing that mindset that it's not a day off a week, but actually let's be really clever about how we capture that. And we've done a lot of work in that area. We've learned a lot around programme quality, particularly with the shift to virtual learning through COVID. We've had some providers that have really stepped up really quickly and have been able to adapt, and some that just haven't. And I think for us, we are now in a really strong position because we've got a very, very small number of strategic apprenticeship providers that we work with. And because we've got those strategic relationships with them, we are seeing much more retention on programme, and the ability to contextualise as well. So our values and everything run through each of our programmes. Again, changing that mindset, not only for the individuals that might want to go on the programmes, but also line managers, and getting them to think quite differently, getting them to see the benefit of having an apprentice or having somebody on a professional development programme. And data as well. So data has really changed things for us. We're able to see where our, you know, workforce gaps are of the future, thinking about how we plug that, how can we reskill through the use of apprenticeships or bring in early careers talent, as part of that journey as well, but also looking at the return on investment on our programs. You know, what progression are we seeing for the 600 people we put through a management program? You know, are they staying with Capita after? Are they progressing into a more senior leader role post-program? And all of that has helped my business case to grow the team internally as well, to really focus on this. And then just, I guess, to summarise, you know, we genuinely believe that great ideas can come from everybody. So by investing in apprenticeships, whether that be at an early careers level or throughout professional development of individuals, it's you know, at the heart of everything we do now, and actually we're able to empower people to influence and really impact their thinking and also our thinking. Hopefully that's just given you a little bit of a flavour of what we do at Capita, and happy to discuss more through the Q&A after. Hand back to Jill.
Sorry, it's back to me.
I know, I was about to say, I think it's going to be Paul now.
Yeah, it's back to me. Yeah, thank you for that fantastic presentation, Lisa. I think I probably forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm too excited about this whole discussion. So my name is Paul Devoy. I'm the Chief Exec of Investors and People. I just want to thank Lisa for her brilliant presentation. Capita were one of the first organisations to achieve our accreditation for apprenticeships, called We Invest in Apprentices. And I think you can see from the presentation that Lisa has just given all the excellent work that they're doing. And having high quality apprenticeships is so important. That's why the Department for Education commissioned us to develop that quality standard, so that we can encourage as many employers as possible to work to these high standards, which is good for the productivity of the organisation, but also makes sure that apprentices have that excellent experience. And that's vital for improving the reputation of apprenticeships across society overall. And just one other thing that I'd like to say as well on what Lisa was talking about. Apprenticeships have never been more important than they are now. We're facing skills gaps and shortages at a level that we've never seen before. And in a previous life, I used to work in skills policy. And there was a research programme that was undertaken by government every couple of years about the skills gaps and shortages in the economy. And the first one I read was in 2002. You could take the cover of the 2002 National Skills Survey and put it on the 2018 one, because the issues were still the same. And I think what's happened over the last 20 years is that the skills gaps and shortages in our economy have been masked by the extent to which we can bring in external talent. And for all the reasons that's well rehearsed, we know that that's not there anymore. So if we're going to create the high productive and skilled economy that the Prime Minister was talking about yesterday, it's vital that we invest in apprenticeships so that we create a sustainable workforce that's got the skills not just for now, but for the future as well. And only by offering high quality apprenticeships can we attract people into them, can we attract our existing workforce to upskill with them. And then business benefits that come from that are not just great for businesses, but they're great for society overall. So a big congratulations to Capita for the work that you're doing in this area, and the leading work that you're doing in this area. I think it's absolutely vital for our society overall. So given the excellence of Lisa's presentation, it'd be great if you could post as many questions as possible, that we get the maximum amount of Lisa's knowledge and experience during this session. And before I move on, what I would like to do is, given that one of the things we're looking at is the profile of our apprentices, can you answer the poll that's on your screen now to say what the profile of apprenticeships are in your organisation? And while you're doing that, I'll just quickly introduce Katherine from the Sutton Trust. So Katherine Doherty works for an organisation that I know very well from the past, to do incredible work on research into the skills gaps and shortages in the economy, and how we can have more progression and social justice. So Katherine, I'm sure, has got brilliant insights from all the work that the Sutton Trust have done. So hand over to Katherine now, and we'll summarise the poll after Katherine's session, after Katherine's presentation.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Paul, and thanks for having me to speak today. Fantastic to see all the work that Capita are doing, because that just highlights a few key bits that I'm going to mention today as well. That's really handy. So just a quick intro to who we are at the Trust and what I do at the Trust. So I think it'll be no surprise to anyone that social mobility in Britain is fairly low, and that the educational opportunities and life chances of a child born today are very strongly linked to their parents' socioeconomic background. So at the Trust, we fight for social mobility from birth all the way through to the workplace, so that every young person, no matter who their parents are, what school they go to, or where they live, has the chance to succeed in life. So I guess we do that in three key areas at the Trust. We have our kind of agenda setting research that identifies the root causes of low social mobility and promotes effective solutions through education and employment. We then have our suite of programs. So we support around 5,000 high attaining young people each year from less advantaged backgrounds, and we support these young people to access leading universities, apprenticeships and careers, helping them to realise and raise their aspirations. And then thirdly, we work around our policy asks, and we keep social mobility at the top of the national agenda. And many of our practical and evidence-based recommendations have influenced national change in all of the areas that we work in. So that's kind of what we do at the Trust. Our work around apprenticeships has really come on in the last few years. We've really had a more in-depth look over the last maybe 5 years, with a particular interest around higher and degree level apprenticeships, with the prospect of gaining kind of industry specific skills and accredited qualification and leaving without any tuition debts. It's not surprising that these are becoming increasingly popular, and Lisa outlined some of those real good benefits for apprentices taking up these opportunities. So we know that they have the potential to be really powerful vehicles for social mobility, which offer an alternative route into these highly skilled industries, but potentially they're not fulfilling their potential at the moment. So back in 2015, we did a piece of research that found that the earning potential of some of the best apprenticeships rivaled that of degrees. And in particular, the evidence showed that students who undertook a high apprenticeship at level 5 increased their lifetime earnings when compared to a grad from a non-Russell Group university. And whilst lifetime earnings is not the only marker of success, it is an important marker and highlights top apprenticeships as a particularly effective route for young people to secure their financial stability. And so that was just a quick look at who we are at the Trust and our work around apprenticeships. So going on to kind of looking at whether degree apprenticeships are delivering social mobility for young people, and appreciate this is just kind of looking at those top degree levels. It's often assumed that apprenticeships don't have access problems because they're undertaken by a disproportionate number of those from less well-off backgrounds. However, this does obscure the fact that there are substantial differences in the pattern of socioeconomic background at different apprenticeship levels. And this is why we're focusing on this degree level today. So at intermediate level, there are almost twice as many apprentices from the most deprived areas as there are from the least deprived. For degree apprenticeships, just 13% of degree apprentices come from neighbourhoods in the bottom fifth of deprivation. You can see that on the screen on the left-hand side there. And over twice as many, so 27%, come from the most advantaged areas. So there's a couple of other key headline stats from a report we published last year, and they're outlined on the screen there. So just a fifth of degree apprentices are aged under 20, which shows that kind of the young people coming straight out of either school or college potentially aren't accessing these opportunities. And over half of those starting degree level apprenticeships are now over 25. So that kind of gives us good evidence that young apprentices from deprived backgrounds are almost being crowded out since the fairly new apprenticeship reforms and when the levy came in. But just to caveat that this was kind of before the pandemic, so this research is kind of over a year now. So I'm not going to touch on this too much, but this is just an idea to show you what apprentices were going through during the pandemic, the kind of percentage of apprentices that were being made redundant. And this actually positively has definitely got better, and we've seen this improve fairly recently. So this, back in 2020, during the pandemic, we commissioned a survey of employers across the country just to understand the impact on apprentices. And this survey that you're seeing, the kind of percentages on the screen to now, was targeted at senior HR decision makers. And it was repeated later in the year to see if the situation has developed. So these were the later stats here. But going on to look at the challenges going forward, because I think there are definitely still challenges, even though we are seeing some positive changes. We know that starts were down even before COVID-19. So between August 2019 and March 2020, so before pandemic, compared to the same period the year before, starts were down by 7%. And that was before the pandemic had now significantly decreased starts and vacancies. So we've welcomed the flexibilities that were made during the pandemic, especially the extension of the financial employer incentives, so which have now been extended twice, in this week, now been extended until the new year. So we know that the majority of these, so I think it's around 75% currently, are being taken up by young people, which is promising to see. But we do know that that on its own is not enough to reverse the sharp decline in those kind of apprenticeship opportunities. Positively though, the number of apprenticeship vacancies has increased month on month since January this year. So those vacancies are definitely going up. Employers are getting back onto kind of recruiting and offering apprenticeship routes for anyone who's interested in those. Just this morning, the latest kind of apprenticeship start data was released. So we know that in the kind of last year or so, there have been about 320,000 starts on apprenticeships, similar to the year before, but that is also down on pre-pandemic apprenticeship start numbers. So some of the other challenges with just kind of raising those start numbers and making sure people can access them is the kind of information and guidance piece. So the pandemic meant that young people missed out on that really crucial face-to-face information and guidance that they might usually receive in schools or colleges. They missed out on open days, direct opportunities to interact face-to-face with employers. Don't get me wrong, I saw some incredible online, digital, virtual events that young people were loving, and young people who potentially couldn't have afforded or committed to that face-to-face were able to access that through a virtual event. So we have seen some really good transitioning of those events online, and we know that those digital events have played a really key piece in keeping those young people motivated and engaged in the last year or so. But we'd like to see that kind of outreach face-to-face work start to come back now as and when it can, and employers are definitely starting to transition, and we're seeing some really cool hybrid models start to come into play. So just on that, what the Sutton Trust are playing our part with the kind of outreach piece. We run an apprenticeship summer school that's for year 12s, high attaining young people from less advantaged backgrounds. And we work with employers to kind of give them a 3-day really intense program about what apprenticeships are, how they can access those, what skills they might need to equip themselves with to try and secure one of those really competitive apprenticeships. So around kind of widening participation that's on the screen as well, we kind of think that a culture of widening participation should be cultivated, similar to that, I guess, of traditional university WP work, and that maybe it's good to start consciously looking at the apprenticeship outreach that is being delivered, who maybe you partner with. Is it schools, is it colleges, is it universities or local community partners who can kind of really tap in to who you want to reach, whether that's young people, whether it's young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, who can help you reach those young people. So ideally, we at the Sutton Trust, we'd like to see this supported by things such as allowing a portion of levy payments to be spent on access and widening participation, because that's not currently allowed. So that's one of the things we would like to see. And then lastly, just on this point on this slide, is targeting apprenticeships to those who need or benefit from them the most. So although our focus is on young people, we do realise and appreciate the massive impact that apprenticeships have for anyone throughout their life at retraining. So that's also really key, although our focus tends to be on young people. But even before the pandemic, the expansion of higher level apprenticeships that were going to older, potentially existing employers was questioning maybe one of the core objectives of providing young people a good quality training route into their chosen career. And we think now more than ever that the focus should return or support some of those young people in accessing these opportunities and promoting social mobility through this route. So in order for apprenticeships to kind of deliver on the levelling up agenda, social mobility and widening opportunity, it should be kept as kind of a key priority of people's early years talent programmes going forward. And we think the kind of balance of apprenticeships across age groups, maybe levels, maybe looking at existing staff versus new starters might be some good points to start looking at your apprentice pools, I guess. So I think I've covered most of the points on that slide there, and I just wanted to talk briefly about an employer guide that we've made last year and published. So that sits on our website, so you're more than welcome to go and have a look at that. So it'll come as no surprise to any of you that over the last few decades, there's been a really welcome focus on improving diversity in the professional workforce, with many people and industries starting to remove barriers, including by gender, ethnicity, sexuality, and in more recent years, social mobility and social economic diversity has begun to receive a lot more attention and a lot more understanding of how to tackle some of those barriers. So this guide here is aimed at, it's made for employers, it was made with employers, and it's therefore detailed advice of how to improve social mobility in the workplace, either for those who are taking their very first steps to improve that diversity, or it might be for people a lot further down the line who really want to target specific areas of their work through recruitment, all the way through to kind of measuring that data around who on what your workforce looks like. So Lisa touched on that a bit earlier around how the data has really enabled them to hone in on the gaps and who to target with things like their outreach. So I think that is pretty much everything from me. That's just a list of some of our research pieces. And hopefully that was helpful, but I'll stop sharing now and hand back to Paul.
Brilliant. Thank you, Katherine. That's such an insightful presentation, up to the usual high standards of the Sutton Trust. So well done on that. So before we kick on, I'll just share the results from the poll that we did earlier. So as you can see, the vast majority of the age profile is in this 16 to 21, which is quite interesting because generally the profile is over 25. So I don't know whether this is just a function of the group that we've got on today, or hopefully maybe it's a shift towards offering opportunities for younger people with apprenticeships. But it's interesting to see how that mix has developed. What I'd like to do is, if I can ask my colleague Scott to share another poll, and while he's doing that, I'd invite you to get your questions in for Lisa and Katherine. We've got a couple in so far, and I'll kick off with a couple for Lisa while the polling's going on. So Lisa, you mentioned in your presentation about how you'd managed to significantly increase diversity of your apprentices. Can you say a bit more for us about exactly how you managed to do that and what you think the key factors were in improving diversity?
So for us, really, that's happened through the resourcing process. So in terms of who we've been partnering with, so we've been partnering with a lot of kind of schools and local communities from disadvantaged backgrounds to increase that diversity, but also through the gamified recruitment process. So as I mentioned, we actually use a tool called Arctic Shores, and Arctic Shores take our potential candidates through a process where it's a gamified process to look at those different behaviours and potential. So we've removed all of the CV, so we've removed all the bias in that sense for for candidates coming through, and Arctic Shores takes them through that resourcing journey. The other thing we've had that we found really good is with our partnership with the youth group and through our youth council as well. We've built an ally programme so that when candidates are going through our apprenticeship programme, they have somebody that can support them through that journey and almost coach them through that journey. So if we've got somebody from a diverse background that hasn't got the confidence or ability to complete that process, then they've got somebody that can almost hold their hand through that process and give them the confidence that they need to get through. And I think, again, that's really helped improve our diversity.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much for that. What about from the Sutton Trust perspective, Katherine? You've got anything from your research about improving diversity in apprenticeships?
Yeah, I think one of the key points would be around measuring the socioeconomic makeup of your current workforce so that you know you have a starting point of who you then need to reach, because it might be that actually you're in an area where you're attracting lots of young people from kind of less, maybe that's not a focus for you. So kind of measuring that data and giving you a start point will identify then your outreach and who you need to work with. So before you even know that, you can't decide who to partner with on your outreach. So kind of that real starting benchmark data piece. And in the employer guidance that I mentioned earlier, there's lots of breakdowns of how you could possibly measure that, which questions to ask, the pros and cons of each of those questions, and how to explain that to staff when you're putting that question out there to try and get that data in. So that would be my kind of first starting point. And then it would be kind of looking at the outreach. And once you know who you want to attract, look at the partners in your area who can reach the people that maybe you can't do on your own. You don't have the capacity or the time. They might have really good, strong relationships with people that you want to reach. So definitely tap into that and don't try and duplicate what other people are already doing really well.
Yeah, brilliant. That's really helpful, Katherine. And then just building on that question about diversity, we've had another question, and which is around about how you use gamification in the recruitment process, Lisa. And one person was asking, did you have a framework to record this against, and what kind of questions did you ask to test the candidates in a different way?
So it's based on a behavioural profile that we've created. So in terms of the behaviours that we're looking for in Capita for that particular role, we do have a different assessment per apprenticeship stream. So it's slightly different if you're coming into doing a digital tech consulting level 6 graduate apprenticeship, or if you're coming in to do a kind of business associate level 3. It does vary. But we use Arctic Shores as a tool to do that. So Arctic Shores records it all for us. It administers the actual gamified assessment, and then we get the results of that off the back of that. So it is using an external tool to do that process. It's not something that we facilitate internally ourselves. It's a product that we partnered on. But behind it is all the behaviours that we're looking for. Yeah,
I think innovation in recruitment is really important in this agenda, isn't it? Because the old models of recruitment, you basically just recruit people like you. You're not widening that diversity, and there's all sorts of biases kick in through the assessment process. Any best practice that you've seen, Katherine, from your experience at the Sutton Trust around about diverse ways of recruiting and using different tools such as Capita have?
Not so much on the tools. I guess we're not quite in the same. I definitely don't have enough knowledge as Lisa to kind of say what works best in regards to the actual tools. Individual employers, and I know there's some on this call, do some amazing things, but they're not all the same. It works very differently for different employers depending on who you're trying to attract. I guess we have seen some really good best practice where there's been a lot of time and effort put into supporting young people to even get into the frame of mind to be able to apply for those opportunities. We see a lot of young people who maybe don't have the confidence, they don't think it's for them. So meeting with kind of current apprentices is always really engaging for a lot of young people. Seeing someone like you who's followed that route, hearing about all the challenges, whether that's they've had to persuade their parents that an apprenticeship is a good thing, is a good opportunity for them to pursue. So that's one of the things I would say every time I've heard it's gone down really well. So meeting with current apprentices, talking about things like the social life of apprentices. So lots of the young people we work with don't want to ask you as an employer that question. They don't think it sounds professional. So they want to ask an apprentice, okay, is it like going to uni? Is it not? What are the pros and cons? Do I still get a social life? Are there other apprentices who sit next to me, or am I the only one? That kind of thing. So I would definitely say that element of it, whatever outreach you're doing, whatever work you're doing to attract other people, use your apprentices, because no one can say it better than they can.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because I know that's something that Multiverse focus on very heavily, is particularly for degree apprenticeships, is to try and make it as much like the university experience as possible, so that potential candidates don't see it as a less attractive option. That all the additional things you get from going to university, you can, from the social aspect and the networking aspect, you can get through the apprenticeship program as well. So I think it's important that we look at, beyond just the kind of core competencies, etc., is the kind of wider rounder package that it offers, so that it really brings that attractiveness. I'm going to ask Jill from the 5% Club if there's any of the questions that she's picked up on the chat that she wants to pose to Lisa or Katherine.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I'll pick up on a couple of points that some people made earlier on. And Tony from Balfour BT was initially saying when Katherine was doing a presentation about degree apprenticeships, that in a sense part of the profile isn't a surprise, because many of the providers insist on high UCAS points. And I think Milena Davis, I think Milena, if I'm paraphrasing your question correctly, forgive me if I'm not, but you were saying sometimes it's hard to get apprentices from deprived areas into degree apprenticeships due to minimum required grades. So I suppose to Katherine, and perhaps I know Lisa, Capita would have a different approach anyway, but Katherine, that's a sort of inbuilt barrier immediately. And what are your thoughts about that, and what can be done about that?
Yeah, I definitely think that is an issue. But some of these degree apprenticeships, I get the point that's been made in the chat that they're needed. So if you do a degree at university, you're solely focused on that usually. If you're doing a degree apprenticeship, you're balancing that with pretty much a full-time job. So they are really difficult. Some of them need an incredible amount of academic skill as well. So there's things like contextualized admissions that universities are just starting to get to grips with. I haven't seen that used so much within apprenticeships, so that could be something to look at when you kind of look at someone's grades and put them into context to see what they might have kind of been experiencing whilst achieving those grades, and contextualize those. So there's plenty more information around contextualized admissions if anyone's interested in that. But also, I guess there was another point made in the chat about that progression pathway route. So if someone doesn't have those grades, they shouldn't just be ruled out of degree apprenticeships, because potentially they're not ready for that right now. But if they start at a level 3, they finish that, complete that, they've got that basic foundation of skills, they've got the confidence to move on to the next level, whether that's a level 5 or a level 6. And not everyone wants to do a degree apprenticeship. Lots of people very much enjoy going to a level 3, level 4, and that will be enough for them. So they're not for everyone. And yeah, there are kind of high requirements to get into them. And some of those have been adjusted over the last couple of years. So lots of universities are working with partners and saying, do we actually need this in our strand of work? And we've definitely seen some of those adjusted. But yeah, contextualizing those grades that are needed and that kind of progression pathway would be my 2 points on that.
Right, thank you. And Lisa, I don't know if you want to come in on that. I mean, I know obviously you're saying Capita are looking at moving away from that apprentice piece and just into grad piece into apprentice piece.
Yeah, I mean, for us, exactly as Katherine said, really it's about that progression. So what we try and demonstrate, as I guess I shared in one of the slides, is just that progression opportunity. So if somebody does come in at a level 3, then they can progress through into a more leadership role, or actually they can go into a more technical role and go up through the apprenticeship levels. Or they might just be happy to, as Katherine says, to get to a level 3 and 4, and they've got their technical skills that they need for their role, and fantastic, they can do a really, really good job. We do offer the degree apprenticeships. as well at the moment, but we've experienced exactly the same barriers as you're describing, and we've challenged ourselves internally of whether that's right, because then how do we fulfill our, you know, social value responsibilities that we're committing to as well. So an example, we've got 30 consulting apprentices that have just started on the level 6 digital tech. Now, you know, it's kind of gone against everything else that we've just described in terms of removing everything, because we've had to put some criteria in for them to get entry onto that level, that degree apprenticeship. So there are cases where we will have to do that, and we'll have to work within the barriers that, you know, are set around, but where possible we're trying to do that progression route, because I think that just broadens the opportunity much more widely.
Brilliant, that's excellent. I've got one last question, because I'm just conscious of time. Certainly from our experience of working with employers, the inflexibility about the levy comes up quite regularly as an issue. I'd be interested in both your insights about what would, if you had a magic wand and you could make one change to the levy, Lisa and Katherine, starting with Lisa, what would that change be?
So for us in Capita, it would be to have control over our levy right across the devolved nations as well. That provides us such a headache because of the footprint of Capita. You know, we feel that and get a lot of feedback that our colleagues in the devolved nations feel discriminated against because they're not able to access that funding. So that would certainly be one massive win for me if we could have full control, but obviously it's a devolved policy, so I'm not sure that's going to happen overnight. The other thing and I know that you only said one, but very quickly, the second thing for me is us to be able to have you know, more control to be able to spend the levy on not only the cost of delivering the apprenticeship, but everything else that wraps around that. I've had to go with a huge investment case and continue to do so to get the right level of support in my team to manage the journey of our apprentices, to manage the pastoral care appropriately, to give them the additional skills and wraparound support. And really, I think the levy should be flexible enough to contribute to funding some of that, because some organisations just won't be in the position to be able to fund those additional resources to do this as best they can.
Brilliant. They're really good suggestions, Lisa. Next time I'm speaking to a minister, I'll make sure
we lobby to the Cabinet Office all the time.
Yeah, well, the more of us that are doing it, the better. What about you, Katherine?
Very similar to Lisa, actually. So if I had a magic wand, I guess my first ask would be that a portion of everyone's levy could be spent on widening participation work, whether that is a pre-apprenticeship programme, whether it's funding an apprentice's travel to start with, whether it's a bursary for someone that needs that to potentially buy uniform clothes or buy tools for their apprenticeship, whatever it might be, used in a variety of ways. Whether that was a portion, a percentage, or a fixed amount, not too fussy, just would like to see some flexibility there, because we know that not everyone's able to use their whole levy, and obviously you can kind of transfer that down to, you know, smaller employers, but we still know, even with all the changes around that people are not using it all. So it seems like such a waste to me that that can't be used to support people onto that apprenticeship, whether it's, like I said, used in a variety of ways. So that would be my one ask.
Brilliant. Well, I think given, if I just share the results, you know, given that most of the organisations on this webinar are looking to increase the number of apprentices, which is fantastic, 87%. We need to make it, and given the need for it has never been greater, we need to make it as easy for employers as possible to run high quality apprenticeship schemes. So I just want to finish off by saying a big thanks to Katherine and Lisa and Jill for their support in running this session, and congratulate Lisa and Katherine on fantastic presentations, and look forward to having more really insightful sessions like this again in the near future. So thanks everyone for joining.